If you're dealing with sports hernia or you're treating athletes that are, there's a good chance that everything you've tried so far only partially worked or didn't work at all. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Today we're not going to talk about the injury the way it's usually described, which is a strain or a tear in the lower abdomen or a groin area. Because seeing and treating it as a local tissue problem is exactly what gets people stuck. We're going to talk about the biomechanics, the pelvis, why surgery so many times fail, but also what you can actually do about it. Sports hernia is not a weak core issue. It's a pressure regulation issue between the pelvis and the rib cage. Traditionally, sports hernia is described as a strain or a tear in a lower abdomen or a groin area. It most commonly occurs in athletes in multidirectional sports. Think hockey, soccer, football, tennis, where athletes have to consistently cut, change directions, and do repeated sprint bouts over and over again. The injury usually shows up as a groin pain that doesn't get better through rest and traditional muscle strain recovery protocols. And here's the thing. Treating it like a muscle strain, it's the wrong model entirely. So let's start with some basic anatomy. You have your rib cage that stack on top of the pelvis, and in between those two, you have your abdominal cavity. Think of this whole system as a water balloon, a pressurized container with the chest cavity up top and the pelvis at the bottom. When everything works the way it should, the pelvis and the rib cage work in sync. So they work as a pair, and here is how that looks like. On an inhale, the rib cage will expand front to back, creating this pump handle, and side to side, but also the belly will expand to some degree as the rib cage expands. At the pelvis, as we inhale, the pelvis is going to change shape into this external rotation position where the sacrum will go into counter nutation, so the base of the sacrum will be tipping back in order to create more space for that inhalation. On the exhale, the pelvis will change shape and this inlet of the pelvis will start closing off. These two pointy bones here called ASISs at the front of the pelvis will start coming closer together. The sacrum will nutate and the outlet of the pelvis will open up. This shape of the pelvis will start pushing the volume back up, away and out of the pelvis. The thoracic diaphragm will elevate in order to push the air out of our lungs, and the rib cage will get smaller in all directions because there's not that much volume in it anymore. So basically, as we breathe, our pelvis and rib cage work as a cylinder. The problem is, for many people and also athletes, that cylinder stops working and the pressure regulation is lost. Due to lifestyle, inactivity, and paradoxically, even some sports, our rib cage becomes restricted and it loses the ability to expand front to back and side to side and becomes compressed like that. That usually happens because our center of gravity is pushed very far forward, so we have to start compensating through compressing our chest in order to push down into the ground to stay upright. So what happens? You still have to breathe in. So because your rib cage lost the ability to expand 360 degrees, your diaphragm still drops, but because the rib cage cannot expand and pull the volume in, all the expansion is going to go down underneath the diaphragm into the abdominal cavity, which increases the pressure down underneath the rib cage, which is the abdominal cavity and the pelvis. So now with this compressed rib cage up top, we create this compression at the top, which pushes the contents down into the abdomen and the pelvis. So the muscles at the lower abdomen, at the front of the pelvis here, become eccentrically oriented because of this forward center of gravity shift and this top-down gradient. Our pelvis starts looking like this, and all of this musculature is getting loaded, but in eccentrically oriented fashion. Now here's an important distinction. Elongated or eccentric muscles don't mean inactive. These muscles are actually working incredibly hard. They have to. They're actually trying to hold all of this contents at the front of the pelvis back in order not to spill out over the front of your pelvis. But the connective tissues, or more traditionally the fascia, is getting elongated or yielded, and that's basically the mechanism of the tear you're seeing with the sports hernias. Sports hernia can happen above the pubic bone at your abdominal wall or below the pubic bone where your adductors attach, but the rules stay the same. Everything is pushing forward maximally, and these tissues cannot hold the volumes and the contents back. So let's talk about why core strengthening alone fails. This is the big one. Traditional sports hernia rehab almost always includes some kind of core strengthening. And here's the frustrating truth. It doesn't work, or if it does, it only works temporarily. And why that is? Because you haven't dealt with the source of the pressure, which is a compressed rib cage up top. So because the rib cage is still compressed up top, everything is getting pushed downward. You can strengthen your abs as much as you want, but you're fighting the very pressures your body is using just to stay upright. You're basically pushing against the fire hose with your hands. It's not happening. So you must release the pressure at the top first, and then, and only then, retraining the pelvic position actually works. Let's also dive into the mesh surgeries. The idea is pretty straightforward. They put a mesh where the tear or a strain happened in order to prevent the guts and the pressures from spilling out through that small hole in the abdominal wall. And yes, it works on that specific area only. But here's what surgeries miss. They don't take care of the pressures that actually created a tear. That's why repeated sports hernias so often don't occur at the repair site, but it occurs very close or nearby to that, where the connective tissue is still in a yielded position and the pressure is just looking for the path of least resistance to push out. Because everything is still pushing forward due to the forward center of gravity, the system is just trying to find a way out. So until you address the system strategy that's driving the issue, you're just moving around the problem. And because of that center of gravity shift, I actually created a free 14-day email sequence where I send you one exercise each day for 14 days with which you can start bringing your center of gravity back. If you want that, check the link in the description. So here's my approach. 2 phases in this order. So before we do anything else, we have to take away the pressure that's compressing the top of our system so our rib cage can expand upon inhalation again, which will reduce the pressure on the lower abdomen. So to take care of some of that compression at the top, we have to take care of these pec muscles. And this pec roll is one activity I love using. So I'm gonna start very close to my nipple here with a lacrosse ball next to a wall right here. I'm gonna get my hand out of the way in this position. I'm gonna start by facing the wall here. And now I'm just going to put some pressure onto my pec muscle and I'm gonna be rolling the ball in this direction from the top of my nipple towards my shoulder on this pec muscle. So I'm actually gonna be turning away from the ball as I roll, and as I get in this position, I'll take a nice breath in. Feel this space at the front, up, and return back. So this is 1 repetition. So again, from the nipple, rolling as I'm turning away, opening this space. As I get to the end, inhaling, filling this space up. I'm gonna do this for 3 to 4 minutes each side. Then I'm gonna use a foam roller and I'm gonna put it on a slight diagonal and I'm gonna start underneath my nipple line, on my chest, on my pec muscle, but also on the front of my arm. From here, I'm just gonna slowly roll the foam roller up as I'm rolling down on the foam roller, pushing everything upward. As I get to the top of my shoulder, I'll feel my chest just open up, and this is where I'm gonna take an inhale. Again, opening that front of the chest up, returning back with no pressure, slightly faster, and again, rolling the foam roller up on my arm and my rib cage, taking an inhale at the end. So the position of the foam roller is something like that. So I'm rolling it on the front of my arm here and my chest upward to push the volume up, and this is where I'm taking an inhale. I'm gonna do this 3 to 4 minutes on each side. And now, because the back of the rib cage is also very important, I'm gonna start on a foam roller directly on my spine, on this lower spine here. I'm just gonna set up, I'm gonna hug myself here, and now I'm working on my right side, so I'll just shift myself towards the right side a little bit so I feel the pressure to the right side of my spine. I'm on my rib cage, and now I'll just roll towards my shoulder blade on the right side of this rib cage as I'm taking an inhale, all the way up to the shoulder blade. Exhale, return back. So the most important part is this roll upward as I'm taking an inhale, staying on the side, exhaling back to the starting position. Again, 3 to 4 minutes each side. So now that we've created some space up top, we can start working on this pelvis position. The goal is to bring these two pointy bones at the front of the pelvis closer together, and note that in between these 2 points lies the transverse abdominis muscle, and us bringing these two pointy bones closer together will have a better chance for this muscle to activate and actually create a pressure regulating system at the front of the pelvis, so everything doesn't spill out, but it can push back up into the rib cage where we now have the space. So because we want to start compressing the pelvis from the sides in order to get those two bony points together, I'm going to start on my side with a half roller, or even a fold-up towel works. I'm going to put it directly underneath my pelvic bone here, and I'm just going to lay to my side, hips and knees bend, and I'm just going to rest here. Take deep inhales and exhales, trying to melt into the roller in order to start closing that space. So inhaling through my nose, exhaling, really melting into the roller. I'm gonna do this from 5 to 10 minutes each side. On many of these exercises, I will most often use a pelvic belt that I created called Levo belt, which wraps around your pelvis and through a turn of this dial, brings those two bony points together and creates a better pelvic shape during those exercises. It is also a great tool as a cue during those exercises, because you'll see I'll be cueing to move away from the belt, which activates those muscles that we just talked about around the pelvis in order to start actively creating the position that we want. If you want to learn more about Levo belt, check the link in the description. So I'm going to start with this hook lying position. Hips and knees are bent, heels are heavy, base of the big toe is heavy, my hip, knee, feet are in line. From here, I'm just going to put some pressure down through my feet, sinking the feet into the ground until I feel my outer and inner hamstrings engage. I want to feel heaviness through my heel and through the back of my pelvis. I do not want to round onto my low back here. As I have that, I'm gonna make a double wiser with my hands right there, and I'm gonna reach the elbows up towards the ceiling, just slightly up and away, so I create the space between my shoulder blades. And this is where I'm gonna take an inhale through my nose, exhale through my mouth, and now I'm using a Levo belt. So with every exhale, I want to make the belt too big. So I wanna move inside of the belt and make this belt too big. This way I will contract the muscles and create the pelvic shape that I want. And I want to hold that position during the inhale, and I want to aim the inhale into the ground. So I want to inhale into the ground. I want to feel more of my body's imprint on the ground upon inhalation. Exhale, keeping the feet heavy, back of the pelvis heavy throughout, expanding the back of the rib cage. I'm gonna do this for 4 sets of 10 breaths. Another way where I can expand the top of my rib cage but still get this pelvis to close is this quadruped on elbows variation. So I'm gonna start on quadruped, but I'm gonna drop down onto my elbows and get the elbows slightly wider than shoulder width. I want to keep the inner elbows heavy and heel of the hand heavy. And from here, I just want to slightly reach the elbows down towards the ground, and I'm going to keep it here throughout. What I don't want is to reach excessively so I get this, but I just want to reach out and away so I can feel my rib cage is expanded front to back. From here, I'll take an inhale through my nose, exhale through my mouth. Again, make the belt too big. As you exhale, hold that position and inhale. You'll feel the front and back of your rib cage expand, especially this front part here. You're gonna be repeating this for about 3 sets of 10 reps again. Now that we have a rough idea of how that feels when the pelvis internally rotates and we are able to hold this position actively during those breathing exercises, we can go into something like this. I'll just need a light rubber band and a wall. I'm gonna put a band behind my back here, and I'm gonna put my feet in front of me, hip width apart, inner heels heavy, base of the big toes heavy, and I'm gonna lower down to about 90 degrees here. Back of my pelvis is heavy, same as in hook lying position. From here, I'm just gonna stay upright. I'm gonna grab this band, reach it out and away slightly so I keep this front of the chest expanded. I'm gonna take an inhale through my nose, exhale through my mouth. Same cue with the belt and the pelvis, making the belt too big. Inhaling, feeling the front and back of my rib cage expand, keeping the heels heavy, base of the big toe heavy. I'll be feeling a lot of this inner quad, but most importantly, on an exhale, make the belt too big, hold that pelvis position as you take an inhale, and feel your chest expand. Do this for about 3 to 4 sets of 10 breaths. So hopefully this video gives you a new lens for understanding what sports hernia actually is and why so many conventional approaches keep people running in circles. The human body is not a collection of isolated parts. It's an adaptive system that's trying to solve problems 24/7. A sports hernia is your body's solution to a pressure problem. And until you address that pressure problem, you're just treating the symptoms. Treat it as a system. Reduce the pressure up top, restore the pelvis, and go from there. Because this video ties so closely to pelvic mechanics, I suggest you watch my Pooch Belly video because it will go into the similar stuff, but maybe even deeper.